Welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders by helping you improve performance using process improvement solutions with bottom line results. My name is Patrick Adams, and this season I'll be joined by three other amazing hosts, including Catherine McDonald from Ireland, Andy Ulrich from Australia, and Shayne Daughenbaugh from the United States. Join us as we bring you guests and experiences of lean practitioners from all over the world. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast, led by your hosts, Shayne Daughenbaugh and myself, Patrick Adams. How's it going, Shayne?
It's going well. It's going well. Loving life right now. Awesome. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited for this episode. We have an amazing guest and a really great topic. So we're going to be talking about the topic of conflict resolution. As you know, Shayne, coaching leaders to ensure their teams feel heard and respected involves active listening, empathy, clear communication, strategies, which I'm sure we'll discuss, such as staying calm, practicing active listening, expressing yourself clearly to feel comfortable during uncomfortable communication, can be effective in absolutely any profession in any industry. So this particular topic definitely applies to every listener that we have out there.
Oh, yeah.
Shayne, before
yeah.
we hit record today, we were chatting a little bit about even a situation that you've been faced with recently or that you know of. What are your thoughts on this topic today?
You know, I'm actually really excited about this topic today, simply because right now going on in my life, I've connected with a really good friend who is having some conflict issues. And it goes kind of like this. There were some changes that leadership is putting out there and kind of pushing down, but it's happening with very minimal communication. Like no one really knows why or what's going on. And because of this minimal communication, there's like significant holes and I would say areas of concern that my friend has in seeing this because they haven't gotten any information. So the words that I'm hearing from them, frustration, deflated, a sense of powerlessness, which then even leads to purposelessness. Like, is my job even worth it if I'm supposed to be here telling them about these issues and they're ignoring the issues? So I'm interested to talk to our guest today, Joyce, about that. I mean, not only how can managers and supervisors and leadership kick conflict to the curb, but what about those under those? How can they manage up? What tools do they have? And what agency do they have to be able to impact that so that they don't have this sense of powerlessness, so they can communicate in a way in a way that is listened to and that they're able to remain calm, like you said, calm and collected,
right?
But also just in a way that gets the message across. So I'm really excited about Joyce Weiss that we're having here on the show. Our guest today holds a master's degree in counseling from Oakland University in Rochester, Michigan. I almost said Minnesota because that's
right down the road. Right down the road.
Right down the road from Lean Solutions. Is the author of the best-selling book, Take the Ride of Your Life. She serves as the official curator in conflict resolution for the World of Business and Executive Coach Summit. Joyce hosts the live broadcast, Kick Conflict to the Curb, interviewing department managers and thought leaders. She is one of only 215 women globally to have earned the Certified Speaking Professional designation. Wow. Joyce, that's a mouthful right there. Let's see, where am I at? Known as the Queen of Conflict Resolution. I love that title. Joyce works with department managers, growth-minded individuals, and small groups to help them use their voice confidently without losing their cool. Joyce, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Such enthusiasm for the topic. That's a good thing to make the guest feel welcome.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excited to have you.
Joyce, I am just right out the bat. I want to know more, and I certainly want our listeners to understand a little bit about this idea, kick conflict to the curb. And that's like your brand. That's what your whole business is revolved around that. Can you please explain that a little bit to us?
Sure. Well, kick conflict to the curb. I could thank COVID, believe it or not, for the beginning of my brand. I was a keynote speaker, and then COVID sort of put a halt on that for many of us. And then it dawned on me, I wanted something more. I wanted to go deeper. So I decided to start interviewing my clients And I said, what conflicts are you going through? Let's talk real. And there was a pattern that started showing up. Number one, many of them said either they or their direct reports felt invisible and overlooked. And number two, they were caught in a conflict and nothing ever got resolved. It's like they were in a hamster wheel and going around and around and around.
Right.
So that's when it dawned on me, okay, here it is. I've always been a coach, so I'm going to concentrate on coaching and facilitating to help people kick conflict to the curb. And it's not, I mean, I know you're all about lean solutions. Hello, I did research on you too. And and we're going to get into this. It saves time. And so that's where it was born. And now it's growing and growing. And I have a trademark. Is it up there? Yeah, it's right up there. Of course, Kick is, I could see my camera. Oh, well, life isn't perfect, folks. So that's where it started. And it's just, like I said, it's continuously blooming because there's conflict. What do we do with it?
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's a great introduction into obviously the topic of the day, and it's fun. It's exciting to kind of put this fun spin on conflict because it can be such a huge drag. And you know, as we said in the beginning, everyone experiences conflict, no matter what job you're in, no matter what role you're in. And you know, you touched on this just briefly, Joyce, about time. I mean, if you think about what we do in the lean world, a lot of times we are looking at, you know, the amount of wasted time that we spend. We're trying to be more efficient with our time. And conflict is a big one that I don't think we hit on very often, as far as like how much wasted time comes out of conflict, especially if it is not approached in the right way. Because we all will have conflict. It's not like we're going to get rid of conflict, right? We're human. So we'll always have conflict, but it's about how do we respond when the conflict comes to make sure that we deal with it in the most efficient way possible, as well as solving it correctly so that we don't create more conflict down the road or bad vibes or whatever it might be. Right. So I'm curious to hear, like, as you mentioned, you can save time. Like, how does that work? Can we kind of dive into that a little bit deeper and understand how can we save time by kicking conflict to the curb, as you say?
Unresolved. I love the question. Unresolved conflict costs us big time. Productivity. Our relationships get destroyed by unresolved conflicts. What about our health? Maybe your viewers or listeners, or I know I've been affected by unresolved conflict because it just churns and churns and churns and never getting it resolved. And conflict, when we're talking about saving time, we've got to realize that healthy conflict puts out fires. And by understanding that responding and flexibility help with healthy conflict, that saves us time right there. Unhealthy conflict, it starts the fires. And unhealthy conflict, it's like, oh, if you win at all costs, demean others, retaliating. And I have a guest on my show called Kick Conflict to the Curb, who is a plant manager. And he talked so much about how his team, there's no waste, because they do lean in their company. And he said, there's no waste when it comes to my team. They know all about accountability because I tell them from day one, you're accountable not just for you, but for your team. When I'm not in the plant, you better act the same as I'm in the plant. And if it's not, and I hear about it, there's no going around it. We are going to have a tough conversation. And there's going to be no excuses. I mean, Willie Jones was just so incredible as a guest because he said everything that both of you already said about the leaders. And he told me it saves the plant time by having tough conversations instead of, and we're going to get to that, the conflict averse people. And he got, and I'll just have to say this thing, he received so many promotions because he spoke his truth even when he was shy. But he started getting respect, and that was 30 years ago, and he kept on going up the ladder. So you want to know about it saves time, and it also gives you that respect.
Right. Joyce, you're making me think of Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor. And, you know, as a leader, just having those conversations, not turning your eye to it or not waiting until it's too late. What is it you do when you're coaching leaders to make sure that their teammates feel heard, respected? I love how I wrote down, you know, sometimes we feel invisible. You know, how do you help leaders make sure that their team doesn't feel invisible? What do you coach them at or on or anything?
Number one, I coach them at or on, however you want to say it. Start asking curiosity questions. Don't tell. Don't say, this is what how do you like the way I point? I only point when I'm being a bad leader, then you know. This is what you have to do versus, how can I help you? Tell me more about this. How do you see it? And I'm going to throw this one in. And if we have time, I'll tell you why it's important to me. What don't I know? And this one, people actually start crying to me when I coach direct reports and they say, my leader actually asked me, what do I need from them? So those coaching questions are going to make people feel heard, not invisible. They're not going to feel pushed or judged. So that's the beginning.
I love it. I feel like there has to be, even before that, I would say there has to be a level of trust that's been established in order for direct reports to honestly answer those questions. Because I could imagine for some leaders, you know, I've worked with leaders that are, you know, command and control, like you were showing us, you know, pointing and yelling. And for someone like that to just all of a sudden one day they come out to the floor and they're like, hey, so what are some things that I should know that I don't know? You know, there's a lot of people that are probably going to be like, oh, nothing, you know everything.
Right. Why do I want to share that with you when it seems like you?
So what are you getting at? What am if I say something, am I going to get in trouble?
Is this a trap?
So, Joyce, what would you say? You know, obviously I love the questions, and I 100% agree with you that the curiosity questions are the key. But leaders have to be genuine. They have to genuinely want to listen to understand. They can't, and there has to be an approach that builds up to that where they've developed a certain level of trust. Would you have any recommendations on, you know, how leaders develop that level of trust where people would be honest to answer those curiosity questions that you laid out?
God, I'm jumping out of my chair with that question. Start with the fact that you have to be humble. You have to have humility as a leader. And leaders who are listening and say, I have no idea what she's talking about. We know what the word humble and humility, we know what that's all about. What that means as a leader is be real, realize that you don't have all the answers. And once your direct reports talking about trust, hear you say something like that, and that is a sign of strength. When you can say, I don't have all the answers, I need you. That is the beginning. I'm so glad you said, yeah, first let's build the trust. That's the beginning of having trust and building trust. And I'd like to share a story about Ron. If that's, I mean, I'm a storyteller, okay?
I love
Sure.
stories.
Can't help my keynote speaking, that still comes up. So Ron is a seasoned department leader. During his first promotion, he was just here. He's here now. He had a chance to go on Zoom and share with his colleagues about the newest updates for the company. And he was so excited. And he said to me, Joyce, something happened to me during that Zoom meeting that was so atrocious that I never forgot about it. And as a result of that, I made sure that when I kept on growing, I would never do this to my direct reports. So I said, what is this horrendous meeting? Ron was all ready to share his screen when it froze. I'm sure we've all experienced that on Zoom. And he already knew that he had to take a deep breath, and in 30 seconds, he'd think of something. He was an engineer. Okay, so you're thinking that kind of thoughts. And he knew that in 30 seconds, he'd have it fixed. His supervisor was on the call, Jody. She was a leader without humility. She was embarrassed. It was a horrible reflection on her, is how she was thinking. She dove right into the meeting, took over. Ron was devastated. So that's how and that's how most of us who are leaders learn how to be a good leader from some of the bad stuff that happens to us. So that's how you don't build trust, is when you don't allow, I hate the word allow, when you don't accept the fact that everybody fails. Let's figure out what went wrong, not as a judgment, but as a positive thing. What opportunities are there? And this isn't glorified motivational stuff, and you know that.
Hello, everyone. I am sorry to interrupt this episode of the Lean Solutions podcast, but I wanted to take a moment to invite you to pick up a copy of my Shingo Award-winning book, Avoiding the Continuous Appearance Trap. In the book, I contrast the cultures of two companies I worked for, and though each started with similar lean models, one was mechanistic and only gave the appearance of lean, while the other developed a true culture of continuous improvement. The contrast provides a vivid example of the difference between fake lean and true lean. You can find the book on Amazon. Simply search my name or the title of the book. You aren't a reader? No worries. The audiobook is also available on Audible. Now, back to the show.
So Joyce, I like this, and let's build off of the Ron story and go back to kind of what I was talking about at the beginning with my friend who is a direct report of leadership. That, I mean, there needs to be a conversation, because this person was practically in tears. And once you're in a position or a job that you feel like you have no voice, that you're invisible, and that leads to that sense of purposelessness. Like, what does it matter in my job if you're not going to listen anyways? Then employees disengage and eventually just walk out the back door, sometimes right out the front door. What would you coach to that person? And let's say it's Ron in this case. Here, this is a great example. His supervisor came in, took over the meeting, ripped the carpet out from underneath him. What would you coach Ron to do in managing up to kicking this conflict to the curb?
I'm not silent because I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say first. A few choices with this great challenge that you're giving me, Shayne. Choice number one, don't say anything, delay your response. And that doesn't mean you're going to avoid it. Delay your response and think, do I want to have this conversation with Jody, or don't I? If you decide that you don't want to leave the place, which you don't leave a place just because you've got a lousy boss, because you're probably going to have a lousy boss somewhere else, you got to fix it. If you decide you're going to do something, I have a strategy called making conversations safe. It's all it is I want to, I don't want to. So bear with me. I would say, okay, Ron, what would you want to say to Jody? and he'd say, we practiced, and this is what he would probably come up with. Jody, I don't want to be disrespectful. You are my supervisor. I do want to voice a concern about me either growing within the company or being taken seriously.
Mhm.
Are you willing to have an important conversation? That opens it up. Is this making, I see a lot, I see that, but do you have questions for me on this before I go on?
So you're giving them, the other person, agency to decide if this is the conversation they want to have or not. So you're not forcing them into it. I'm getting
Right.
buy-in from Patrick that if I'm saying this, hey, do we want to have this conversation? Patrick can say no, right? As my leader, as my boss, supervisor, whatever, he can say no, and then I have to step back and maybe come at it from a different angle. But I do appreciate
I
giving.
also heard the clarity too in the beginning of, I don't want this to happen and I do want this to happen. So being very clear on
Right.
exactly what your intentions are.
Yes. And it makes the conversation safe. Direct reports who are conflict adverse don't know how to start the conversation. This is the beginning. I mean, I've got all kinds of other steps in the Weiss Communication Success Plan, but this is the second step. The first step was when I said, you've got to think, am I going to say, it's stepping in the gap, giving yourself a moment. What do I want to say something now, or do I want to delay it? If that, like I said, just to recap, if you decide to say something, this is a beautiful way of doing it. And it doesn't take years to learn. You have to practice it on your dog or cat first, by saying, hey, I don't want, I do want. And then it becomes a habit, and you at least start it and it's safe.
I love it. Well,
Good.
Joyce, you mentioned the example, a very specific example of maybe the negative side or the beginning of what could become a negative conversation. Maybe that one ended up positive. I don't know. I want to assume that it did, but can you give us an example? Maybe it's that one, maybe it's a different one of a tough conversation that did happen and ended up in the positive, that and kind of what did that look like? What did each party feel like after the conversation? Maybe what were some of the positive results that came out of that?
Yes. And let me start off. This is another story. It's all about unmet needs. Unmet needs. So when we're having tough conversations, if your need, oh, I see. Hey, I can talk to your dog. No, sorry, but he did appear. When you're having a tough conversation, you've got to realize, and this is a hint for all of us, that if you have a need to say something to someone and you don't, that is going to show up. Lousy night's sleep.
Right.
You're not going to like the person. Okay, now
So-
that I set the stage. So Sue knew that she had to have an important, not tough, but let's say an important conversation with her husband. So this is more of a personal, but anybody can have this at work too. And her mother-in-law had to come and live with them because of health reasons. And Sue understood that wasn't an issue. What she knew, though, is she was having a problem internally, is that she couldn't sleep, is because she said, I have to have a lot of space within myself. I have to be quiet so I can re-energize for work. And I'm really concerned. So I said to Sue, so who do you need to talk to? And that's what that direct report, you got to think, who do I need to talk to? It was her husband in this case. So she did the, I don't want to, I do want to. She said, I don't want to create stress between us. I do want to address a concern of mine to make sure that your mother's stay is positive. Again, she then said, are you willing to have this tough conversation or this important conversation? He said yes. And by her asking the curiosity questions, because that they go together. I want to, I don't want to, creativity questions. How do you see this? What do you need from me? It's not that anything was resolved here, Patrick, but what happened is that she spoke her truth.
Mhm.
She did it by making the conversation safe. And her husband said, of course, I know that about you. You're going to get your space. You make sure you don't have to tell us, and they figured out how. So that's why it works at home or at work. We talked about a few things, but what do you do if you are a leader and you're a good leader and someone doesn't want to hear your opinion about some feedback? We've all experienced that at home or work.
Right.
So anybody here who has children know that one of the best things to do is say, okay, Tommy, what would you do if you were me? And sometimes the conversation works well.
Mhm.
So when someone doesn't want to hear, you can say the same thing. Okay, what would you do if you were me? And I didn't want to hear constructive feedback about my performance. What would you do if you were in my position? Then ask the question. What do you need from me? Is there a better way? How can you handle this? It's you can use this one strategy either in the beginning form, or stretch it out in something really tough when you have a bully that you're working with. And he or she doesn't care what you have to say, supervisor. It's
Right.
my way. Well, you don't know how to deal with a bully. This is a good way to start, at least having the bully understand that he or she isn't, I'm not going to be a target for you, bully.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
yeah, at least that
Go ahead, Shane.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
I was just going to say, I would hope that the majority of our listeners are working for humble leaders, but I'm assuming there are probably some that are not and are working maybe for bullies. I won't ask you to call them out, but you mentioned one strategy. I'd be interested to hear a few more thoughts on that, because I do think that it's probably more regular than we all think, at least in my experience. I don't know that there's a lot of leaders out there that were promoted into positions and have never really learned to be a leader. Maybe they've never led people before. Maybe they don't have that experience or training behind them, and all they know is command and control, or scream and yell, or be a bully. Shayne asked this earlier, how do you manage up? But in this situation, what are some other strategies that some of our listeners could use to try to open up those conversations and get someone to engage in a healthy conversation?
Mhm. So, in other words, we have a relatively new leader. I'm just clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
You want a new leader moving up. He's got a bully that he is dealing with as an employee. How do you deal with that? Is that what you're asking me? I just want to
I'm
make
going the
sure.
other direction. So I'm saying I'm maybe a manager or a frontline leader, or maybe I'm an employee at a company, and my upline, my manager, my supervisor is a bully. And I want to have an uncomfortable conversation, but I'm not sure what strategies I should use in order to have that conversation with someone who is my boss.
Right.
Okay, here we go.
Bring it.
I had a bully in my life. Oh, Joyce, not a queen of conflict resolution. Why do you think I'm in this field? Because I was a target for many, many years from a bully. And I had to figure out if I'm going to get into this being the queen of conflict resolution. This is before I gave myself the crown. I knew that I had to figure certain things out. I use this all the time, whether it's now, I haven't shared yet what the solution is. One of the solutions is that when you have a bully, or you've got to figure out, number one, observe the bully. For me, I realized I wasn't it was a him. I wasn't his only target. He bullied everyone. And that's important to realize, that you don't start taking things personal. Oh my God, I'm so insecure. I'm weak as a leader. No, 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 no. You're not the only one. This bully has a problem. He does it to everyone. Number two, start paying attention to what the bully does. What is his or her way of bullying? For me, it was always questioning me, whatever I did. The vitamins that I took, the fact that I worked so hard, I was being judged. And raise your hand, guys. Do you like being judged?
No.
No, oh, I said raise your hand, Patrick. You're so
No, I'm
good.
not doing
I'm just listening, doing what I said. I'm told.
You're a good listener. So, of course not. So by paying attention to what the bully is saying, and you realize that he or she is judging you, you got to realize you're not the only one. Usually bullies or these tough, difficult people do the same thing to other people. So then maybe you're going to relax and you're going to say, you're going to get rid of the imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough for this position. I'm not strong enough. Baloney. You just have to figure out, where in my life have I been strong? And then the third part, and this is the part that people usually don't do, self-reflection. What am I learning about myself? That's when once you realize that you're not the only target, you realize that he or she is judging everybody. That's when you can say to yourself, what am I learning? Maybe then the bully really won't continue bothering you, because you could say to yourself, oh, he or she is predictable. I'm going to be judged. You're saying this to yourself, and you can say something funny. Okay, bring it on inside. Not you don't say it. Bring it on. I'm ready. Then the bully isn't bugging you anymore.
Right.
Am I making myself clear here?
So this is more how I deal with the bully, not necessarily how I bring resolution to this relationship. Right?
Yes.
This gives me a safe place to reside when I'm in an atmosphere of bullying, or it's just, conflict.
Which makes sense, because we can only control our own ourselves, right? I mean, we can't make them change. We can continue to try to have that conversation, but at the end of the day, that person may or may not accept it. They may say, no, I don't want to have that conversation. Well, then you just have to, as you said, Joyce, reflect on what you're learning through this and how you can react appropriately and manage your own emotions and behaviors, and make sure that you end up making the right decision.
Right.
Absolutely. Because sometimes some bully, it depends where they are on the spectrum. Some bullies, you could have a conversation like, I'm frustrated when we have conversations and judgment appears, or, something like that. And there are many times when my clients have conversations like that, and the difficult person says, oh my God, I didn't realize you did that. Well, if you don't have that conversation, folks, that's a good story. That's a resolution. Right. Now, if you have a conversation like that and the bully said, you take things too personally. Yeah, forget it. You're so insecure. You're so weak. That's when you don't just have a bully. You probably have a narcissist. I know we're getting a little bit up, but you got them together.
Right.
Wow. If that's not a signal, you ain't going to do anything with this person. Hate to say that.
So Joyce, as we're getting ready to wrap up, I do have one more question that I want to bring up, and we've kind of danced around it, but I would love for you to be a little more specific. What about for those people that are conflict averse? Like my wife doesn't like conflict. She's kind of that peacemaker. She wants to just like whatever it is. And I know we have those all over our organizations, all over the world. Some people just don't like that. So what suggestions would you have? Because conflict, that's an aggressive word in itself. But for those that are averse to that, what suggestions can you give them to make them feel empowered, or tools that they might be able to try out on their dog or
Okay, so you're so gentle with this question. I'm gonna come in like a bulldog now. I'm gonna say, because I always have people say, as they fold their, you can't see my arms, but as they fold their arms when we're talking about, Joyce, I'm shy. And I just can't have those conversations. This sounds good. You seem like a really great facilitator, but it's not going to work on me. And I say this to everybody, and I believe me, I say this to myself. We label ourselves. So if you say that if your wife says she's conflict averse, you're saying that she is, you keep on saying that, you're not going to deal with it. Versus own the fact that you are. Do you want to be that hamster? Keep on bringing up hamsters. Okay, do you want to be that hamster in the hamster wheel and not resolving conflict? Or do you want to start feeling confident about yourself and making a change in your communication skills? It's not easy. That's why one needs to have either a friend or a coach help break that pattern. But so many times it starts when you're in high school. I don't know, conflict, or I grew up in a family where conflict, we brushed it under, or it was so big, I'm afraid of it. Fine, it's time to close that chapter and figure out what can you do about it.
Yeah. Love it. Joyce, obviously, we only have so much time, unfortunately, because I feel like we have so much more we could talk about. We didn't even scratch the surface or get into your book at all, which I know is available for some of our listeners if they want to go out there and find your book, Take the Ride of Your Life. I'm sure they can go to your website. But if people want to connect, if they have other questions, if they want to reach out to you for some assistance, where would they go where would be the best place to connect with you?
Email to start the conversation, which is joyce@joyceweiss.com. And we could set up a 30-minute jam with Joyce session that's complimentary.
I love that.
Love it.
And JJ, right? It's all in marketing. So jam with Joyce, and we could talk about an issue that you may be having. You can explore. Lately, people have been just saying, okay, I've heard about you. I've watched your shows. What does it take for you to coach? How much is it? What are you going to do for me? I don't care. It's your Jam with Joyce session. You figure out what you want to do with that. My website, definitely joyceweiss.com. That's where you could find coaching packages, facilitation packages, face-to-face or Zoom, lots of articles and videos that you can use in your own newsletters. And if you want a copy of my book, I have a deal. It's the VIP special. Send me an email and you get two autograph copies of the book, one for you and one for someone else for the price of one.
Wow.
And that's an option they have. You have. And then the other thing is, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a brand new newsletter that was launched a couple months ago called Kick Conflict to the Curb. You see a little pattern here. And Shayne brought up when we were talking before the recording started, is that you can go to Kick Conflict to the Curb and take an assessment, and you will receive 3 emails from me about your results and a couple really cool videos. Nice. So you can figure out how to feel confident and get conflict to the curb. So those lots of places for people to reach me. And
yeah, easy enough. Well, we will drop all of those links into the show notes. So for those listeners out there that want to reach out to Joyce, you can go right into the show notes. And you can find those links and email Joyce or go check out her website, grab the assessment. They'll all be right there in the show notes. Joyce, it's been great to have you on. Great conversation. Love your energy. It's like with you and Shayne on the same show, it's like just a huge party here. You know, we're having...
I know. I mean, oh my God, I love it. I love it. Let's continue. Have me back, and please, I want you on my show, both of you.
You bet. We'd love to.
I'll reach out
for sure. Cool. Well, thanks again, Joyce. We appreciate the time and look forward to connecting again.
Absolutely. Thanks to both of you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe. This way you'll get updates as new episodes become available. If you feel so inclined, please give us a review. Thank you so much.